Up to this point, we have created a server that is receiving a request from the browser and parsing out that data, parsing out the index or the page name, and sending back just a plain text in response to that page name that got parsed out. And so what we'd like to do now is, instead of sending just plain hello world and so forth, let's actually send some HTML pages back to the browser. So I've just created two really complicated HTML pages. I know this looks like really complex code, and maybe you can take another class to figure out what's being done here. It's not even obviously complete, but it'll work for the purposes of our demonstration. So let us examine what we're going to do next. So I'm going to just bring this down a little bit and take you to Node.js, the web page. Because anytime you're learning a language, the more comfortable you can get with the documentation for that language, the better off you're going to be. So it's good practice to start getting into, just like we've done in NPM, getting into the documentation and exploring and getting comfortable with the verbiage and so forth. So anyway, I'm in Node.js and a web page, and I'm going to click on the docs. And what I'm interested in is this API reference documentation. So I'm just going to go into that. And this is basically the manual, if you will, for using Node.js. So here's all of the things that we can do and all of the syntax that we need to do it. So I'm going to draw your attention here to the file system, and we'll look at this documentation. Woof, that's a lot of stuff. So if I click on file system, I'm brought down to the bottom of the page, and here is a discussion of what it is, and this is file IO. So this is what we're going to use to read in from a file that we're going to be able to send that HTML file back to the browser. And here's an example of how we are going to link to it or require the module. So we're going to create a variable, and we're going to use the require and fs. That is fantastic news. I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and there's lots of things to do. I'm going to draw your attention to fs, which is file structure that we just saw. And I'm looking for, this is the one I want to handle. We're going to use this read file. And I'm going to click on the read file method for more documentation. So we're going to read a file, and we'll notice that the return, we're getting the file, and then some of our optional parameters that we want to be aware of is there's some options, and here is a callback function. So this is the one I want to explore. So let's see, that would be here. So we're noticing that, there we go. So we notice that here's our example, fs read file parentheses. This is the file that we want to return. They skip that optional parameter. And here is our callback. Remember that this fat arrow simply is equivalent to the word function, parenthesis, and then our two parameters. So we've eliminated the word function in front of the parenthesis, enclosed our parameters in the parentheses, and then followed it with the fat arrow. So the callback then is passed two arguments. It wants we're going to set up the error, and the error simply says if the file, if there was a file, if there's an error processing that file, and then the data is the contents of the file in a raw buffer. Okay, so I think you kind of start to see what we're doing here. So anyway, this is where I'm getting this information. So when I start writing out these functions, you'll know I'm not doing it sort of randomly. That's where you get the information. All right, so let's see. So it said we need to require the fs, right? So I'm going to do a var fs equals require, and it said to do fs. So that's right out of the documentation. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do is read that file. I'm trying to incorporate what I want to do here with, let's just comment this out for now. I'm doing a control backslash, or I guess it's a forward slash, the one below the question mark, that does all of that commenting at the same time. Okay, so if I do fs and then there was read file, okay, and then it said I need to put in the name of the file. So I'm just going to put in index.html for now, just for simplicity. So I want to read the file. If I get a request from the browser, I'm going to read the file that's in the same, assumably it's in the same directory as the index.js on my server, which in this case it is. So, and then it said I get a callback function. So I can either do function, and then it said air and data, or I could do the fat arrow, which was, let's make sure we see the fat arrow so we can see it as, there we go. Either one of those is the same. Okay, so read file, and then this is an anonymous function, so I need to open and close it. Fantastic, thank you. With the curly braces, and then we'll close that statement off, the read file statement off with our semicolon. Okay, so the anonymous function then said that it was either receiving an error or it's receiving the data that it read from the file. So assumably then we have index has been read, and remember a callback says I'm a function that's going to run once this first parameter is completely finished. So all of the file is being read into a buffer. Once that's completed, it sends either an error message or the data. So assumably we're going to get the data back in our example here. And then we do what we've done before. Let's see, I'm going to copy and paste. Copy, my goodness. Okay, copy and paste that. My goodness, that's busy today. Okay. And then highlight it and uncomment again with Control \. Okay. Line this up properly, and then we'll make the edits that we need to make. So I just didn't want to type all that stuff over again, but I do need to make some revisions. Okay. So let's see. So we're going to head and read the index file, and that file is going to be put into our data variable. So we're then going to send a header back to our browser, and our header is going to have the 200 response error code in this case. But instead of plain, we're going to send HTML. So we're telling the browser that we're sending markup language to you that you're going to want to parse. And then instead of sending, in our ending message, instead of sending plain text, let's send over, rend rover, send index, right? Oh, sorry. So that would be data, right? Because data is the variable that's holding our HTML data. All right, so I'm going to Control save that and start our server up. Node index.js. Server is running. Pull my browser back into view here, and let's run localhost 3000. And I think at this point, if I just put enter, because I haven't specified a page name yet, anything I enter at this point is going to return that index.html page. If I do about .html, it's going to return that index.html page. But the good news is it is returning an HTML page. And I can verify that. Let's just verify. There's inspector, and there's my body tag. It put in some stuff for me, so it filled in some of my bad HTML code there. And then network reload, and we see the status code 200. All is going well. Okay. So I think the next step then is let's decide which we're going to end up sending, right? So now at this point we have parsed out file names, and we're going to put this all together. So I am going to make this much cleaner. Rather than using all this if statement, I'm going to cheat a little bit and copy some code I already have written and copy that in. Okay, so rather than using this information, what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm going to replace all this FS stuff that I've done already. So I will slow down here in a minute and show you what my grandiose idea is. All right, so now what I've done is tried to make things fairly simple, where I'm creating a variable called the file. I'm doing a switch statement on the path name. So let's look at the path name. Case equals / about, that's similar to that if statement we just did. I'm just going to set the file name equal to the file name without that \. So in other words, I'm kind of in a long-winded speech getting rid of that \, because I want it to read this. The file system can't read \ about HTML. It'll be looking in the wrong directory, but it can read about.html. So I'm getting rid of that /. And then I have a default in this case if the about isn't typed in, and you can add on the 404. So I'm just trying to give you a general idea. So anyway, so I'm parsing out, doing a case, let me slow down, doing a switch statement on the file name, on the path name, converting that path name to a file name that the server can read, and then in this case breaking out of the switch statement or setting up a default. So once I have the file parsed out, the file name parsed out, I can do that file read. As the file name, the file receives the file that was determined to be the correct file name. This way I don't have to write so many fs read files. I can just send this method the proper file name. And then again, here's my anonymous function. And in my anonymous function, I now can send a header with the text HTML. I can, well, there's two ways to do this. I didn't mean to leave this in, so I'm just going to delete this so I don't have to explain it. So we're just going to do this. Send a closing method, and in that closing method to the browser, send the contents of the file that was read based on this argument. Let's see if that works. All right, so I'm save that, restart my server. Okay. Oh, I've got an error. What is my error? It doesn't like on line 53. I don't have a line 53. Oh, I guess I do. Let's see. So I probably have an extra one of these here. So let's get rid of that. This one goes with that. And that's what happens when you copy over code, right? Okay. So if I put that there, I'm going to erase this so I don't have to scroll so much. And let's see if that's better. So let's try that again. Yay. Okay. So if that all went smoothly, I need to find a browser, which I have apparently shut down again. Pull up a browser. It's coming. There it is. All right. So we're going to do localhost, port 3000. And if I put in index.html, it should serve my index page. So that worked out well. And then it said if I put about.html, about.html, I should get my about page, which I did not. So let's determine, why I didn't get that HTML page. That was not what I expected. So let's figure out why. So the path name was about.html. So that should have rendered true. And then case is about.html, the file about.html, and it sent over the index. Why did it do that? All right, so I put it on hold, the video on pause, because I had no idea why it wasn't working. And now I do. Talk about stupid errors, but I'll show you what the problem was. So I re-ran the server, and the point was that if I did HTML, it returned my HTML page. And then I was expecting a different page to render itself, about.html, and it said this is my index page. So I thought, oh gosh, it's sending the wrong page. And that was disturbing because I felt like this code was right. Well, it turns out that the code is correct, but if you create two versions of your index or about HTML page to determine that they're different, then what you probably should do to make that super clear is on your index page, type in, this is my index page, But on your about page, you might want to change the verbiage to about, just so that you're clear that you actually sent the different pages. So now that it's more clear that my about page is in fact my out page and not my index page, and I don't have to restart the browser because the only thing I've changed is the actual files, the HTML files, and I haven't made any changes to the browser or to the server. So I don't have to restart my server. Now when I reload about.html, let's see, it does in fact send over a page that says about. So apparently not only do you have to change your server information, but make sure that your index and about.html page actually look different so you know you're sending over the proper pages. Anyway, so let's type in index.html and just make sure this is working. And there's my index page. And then if I put in about, or boot as they say in Canada, I think. Anyway, there's our about HTML page. So what we have done here then is we have utilized our file server. We've created a file server object utilizing the file server module that is available to us in Node.js. And then we were able to read into that file, send the proper file as an argument to the read file method. It read the file, returned in a callback function us two values. One is the error message if an error was received, and then the other is the raw data, the buffer, if you will, of the file that this method read in. We then wrote our headers like we've done before, and then we sent as a final response back to the browser, here is that raw data. So that is utilizing the file server object and sending now HTML pages based on the request from the browser.